So this is our last day of our 4-day workshop on architecture and interior design in Archline XP. Today is the last day, and today is also the exam day. What does that mean? After this workshop, you will check your email. I will send the exam to you on your emails. And you will have time to solve the exam till Sunday. So you have 3 days to solve it. It is a very easy questionnaire with 4 questions and a short poll with your feedback. So if you solve the exam, you will gain a certificate of this workshop. It is very easy, so don't worry. And if I go again through our 4-day agenda, in the first day we did a reception room. So here we learn about living room design, how to put furniture inside, and architecture basics of how to create a small architecture house in Archline XP. In second day, we learned how to use tiling in bathroom and how to use KBB tool, which we create kitchen design. And yesterday, we created a documentation of a project. Today, we have 2 topics, lights and rendering. We will open a project with store, which has no lights in it, and we will put some lights in that store. It will be different lights, and it is very interesting to see how the light and the lighting itself works with each other. In the next part of the webinar, we will listen the rules of rendering. So what do you need to know to create a good render? So first we will hear about real-time draft. This is a rendering which you can use during planning the project. We will insert wall table, pendant lights and LED lights, and then change the lighting settings, insert lights from online libraries, and then hear about rendering rules, render styles, which are very important for rendering, materials, rendering setting, and sun and lighting. And I want to just say something about 5 factors for rendering. And first, five factors which are important for speeding up or slowing down your rendering. And first is, of course, your computer. If you have a good computer with good graphic card and hardware, the rendering will work a lot faster. Second is how you set up your render settings. You will hear all about that in the second part of the webinar. And the material reflection. All the surfaces in the project has surface which we apply material on. And that material has some reflection, and within that reflection is important how big it is, because the reflection is important for rendering, because how light goes through the space. And the fourth thing is artificial and sunlight, because if you have a lot of artificial lights in your room, for example, the rendering will have a lot to deal with this project. If you have just one light or just sunlight, it will be a little faster. And the last thing is model complexity. If you have just a room with a bed inside, the render will be a lot faster if you have a very complex room with a lot of flowers, with a lot of materials. That way the rendering will be a lot slower. Okay. At the end, I will give you your last homework. And now we are going to hear the last webinar. The first part is light. light and light sync, and the second part is rendering. Okay. I'm sharing the webinar now.
This is the end result that we are looking for. This is a electronic appliance shop, something where you can buy, you know, computers, tablets, and things like that. This is not an actual location. This is a sort of example project to show you the potential that is in lighting elements. So today we are going to discuss how to create these things, namely recessed spotlights, LED strips, luminous text, and other lighting elements. But this is not really where we start, so we have to circle back a little bit and see how we get things started. If you want to see the project file that I'm using today, then I suggest you go to our website, and there you can download the project file and the very neat course guide that I'll be using during the way. So if you want to get this PDF to follow along, or maybe complete this course on your own, then you can download these things free of charge from our website. So getting back to the topic itself, we have to start with a very basic layout. So that's where everything gets started. And in order to visualize the light sources, I have to start up a rendering. We already discussed how that is done, but if I want to see the result of my work, I need to enable some kind of integrated rendering. So whenever I do something, I will see in the rendering how the light sources look like. So simple as that. So if I start an integrated rendering as a real-time draft, I will expect results which are not high in quality. You see the resolution is going to be quite low, but the feedback will be instantaneous. So every time I do something on my floor plan, the result would be visualized. So as you can see, this location is bathing in light because there's no ceiling. So every time I do some navigation in my floor plan or in my model, the render opens up. Now, this is not something that you have to run every time you work, but doing so would ensure that you know how the results should look like, so you don't have to spend too much time with rendering. Okay, so how do we get started? First of all, let's get familiar with how do we place lamps. So how do we actually, you know, get some kind of light source? So let's look for something for the walls. Wall lamp number 3 is one of the models I like to use, and I'm going to place it on the 2D surface. So I'm just going to click on the element, and I think I need to change the base elevation because this should be higher. 1.6 I think is a good value. By default, this lamp is pushed to the ground, but I'm going to change that before I place it. So now dragging and dropping it, I can snap it. Let me zoom in. I can slap it to the wall. You see on the 3D and on the rendering that the lamp is already on. So every time I put in something, I see on the renders that the lamp is functioning. How does placement look like in 3D? Same story. Drag, drop, and by clicking on the plane, you can just position it anywhere you want. If you want to highlight or fine-tune the elevation values, then you can change that here in the properties tab. So that's how you can position things in the 3D by using the axes or the base elevation marker. I think I have to talk about the units because you see that this model is in meters while the course guide is in millimeters. So if you want to change it to millimeters, you can do that in the properties. Now, once I change the units, I think now the next topic is to actually get a ceiling right. So let's just go back to the 2D and see how do we put a ceiling above our model. There's a couple of things I have to figure out. First, for instance, I have an extra line over there. You can see a spline. I do not need that for my work, so I'm just going to see on which layer it is. This layer is called spline, and I'm going to use the layer walk, which I talked about last time, and I'm disabling the spline's visibility, so I don't need that. Okay, so let's put a ceiling in here. What I do is that I go to the building area, or the toolbar, the building toolbar, and I'm going to click on ceiling, and the plain auto ceiling would be good enough. But for that, obviously, you need to activate the 2D. This is something you can do in 2D only. So let's place the ceiling. And now I see that I have a ceiling with a sort of like a diagonal hash over. I don't need that. So let's just fine tune the ceiling. Two things I have to get right. One is the elevation of the ceiling, which I have to fine tune, raise it just 8 centimeters higher. There you go. And the 2D representation should be modified as well, because I don't want that thick sort of thing. I want to have a simplified view. Yeah, that's much better. So now comes the part where I actually add elements, spotlights and recessed elements into my ceiling. But for that, I need to fine tune how the light sources should look like. So first I'm going to go to the tab where I can define the light sources. I have sort of like a palette of lamps I can position on this ceiling, and I can pick one. I'm going to pick this one, this spot lamps number 6, and I have to fine tune it. Why should I do that? It's because there are too few in numbers. So I have to go to the division tab and set up how I want to position my lamps. If I want to have lamps on polyline nodes, how many lamps I need, etc., etc. This you can fine tune, and once you have accepted it, once you have hit okay, you can save this as an additional element as a template for later use. So I'm just going to do just that, saving it as another template. I think it should be webinar spotlights or something like that. Let me just type that in. Yeah. Once I did that, I can save it, and I can use it later on. So if I hit OK now, I see that it's going to be part of my my palette, which I can use later on. Hit OK. Now I'm jumping back to the ceiling editor, and now I have the webinar assortment of lamps. So let's actually add them to the ceiling. Before I do that, I think I have to raise them up, otherwise they are going to extrude themselves from the ceiling. Now let's go to the place where I can define where the spotlight should be. I'm going to use one vertical line, or one single line to position, and if I hit the check mark, I see lamps are there. However, there are no holes, so the lights won't get through because there's no hole drilled through the ceiling. For that, I need to go to the cut tab, and I have to say that I want to have a hole, which I can do with the check mark over there with that box. Make a hole in the false ceiling. Yeah. The hole is too large. This I can fine tune, decrease the size like this. So one size, the X value is changed, the width is changed, the length should be changed as well. Now it's good. There's a shortcut for this, so if you want to fine tune how the cut looks like, you can do that here. Okay, so one set of lamps is done, but they're not at the right place. So let me go back to the position. And here I can see a bunch of values and padlocks and whatnot. Let me show you how that works. First, let's disable this check mark and fix the value which is not going to be changed. And the rest of the values, I know that it's 500 from one of the sides and 500 from the two edges, which means that this sortiment of lamp is going to be positioned from these sides for 500 millimeters. Now let's have another set of lamps, which I can do by clicking on the plus icon. And now I have to change the values where this line is. So let's say it's 2 meters. Hit the check mark, and then it's created. So it's easy as that. Now let's go to the other side. Again, click the plus, and now I'm going to change the padlock settings. I enable that value and type in 500. And again, by clicking on the plus icon, I can have another one, and that is going to be 2 meters, if I remember well, because this is going to be like a mirror image of the other side. So, okay, that's good. I think we are done. So let's just hit OK and see how it looks like in the rendered image, because that is what we are using to sort of check what we have done. So the 2D updates in a second, the 3D is updated as well. And if for whatever case the rendering is not updating, you can do that with the with this button over here. You can stop the rendering, you can restart it, and then the software would sort of unlink the renders. Renders usually are in connection with your model. Sometimes they're unlinked, but if that happens, just click that button and then it's going to be back on. So you see that the lamps are in place, casting nice light maps onto the surfaces. Even reflections are pretty good. But if I want to continue with my work and I don't want the ceiling to interfere with my further work, I can turn off the lights over there. So from now on, when I edit something else, the ceiling is off. So they are not going to interfere, these spot lamps, with whatever I'm going to do next. And what I'm doing next is bringing in a lamp from an external library, because it's one thing to use ready-made lamps, but it's another story to know how to create ones. So let's go to the 3D warehouse, which you already know. And once we have signed in, for that you need to sign in. This is maintained by another company, so you need to be logged in and online to use it. So let's look at concrete ceiling lamp, which is one of the models I like to use for this model because it's pretty modern. There are two versions. Let me see which one. I think that one is the one I need to download. Remember to keep an eye on the size and the polygon numbers. We learned that last time. I think this should be good enough. So let's just download the object, and when I do, the object is going to be, once I have signified what it's supposed to be, it's going to be added to my design like this. So let me just, yeah. So now the lamps are in, they are positioned in the 3D. And now I just want to move them somewhere else. So I like to position things in the 2D. It's much faster and accurate. So let's just snap to these points, and I can make sure that it's going to be just above this kind of counter. Size is not good. Lamps are too large, so I'm going to have to go to the properties and define the sizes, which I think I can do with the pencil icon. And then I can just change the sizes. So let's do that first before I change anything. Click the uniform 3D scaling, because then if I change one value, all the other values are going to be scaled as well. So I don't have to worry about stretching my items. Another thing I have to check is the material settings. I'm not satisfied with the materials this lamp came with, so I'm just going to change this grayish texture to something else. So let me go to my texture library and look for a chromish. I think chrome 002 would be fine. Hit OK, and now the lamp is changed. So okay, this should be good. Are we done with this? Well, not really. Let me show you what happens if I do that. First of all, I need to position it back because I just scaled it, and scaling is prone to move the elements. So let me just snap it back where it is. Base elevation is not good, and I will see a more difficult problem with these lamps, namely that they are not acting as lamps yet. So let's just highlight it and braze it back. Okay, they are in the right position, and you see that that they are reflecting lights from other light sources, but they don't have that many lamps themselves. Let me just refresh the render again. There you go. So you see that it's not lighting. So why is that? Now this is interesting. First of all, let's say that I only want this lamp to be on and everything else should be turned off. This just takes for a second, and then all the other lamps should be off, and then I can see the lamps in isolation. I see that something is going on. The lamp has a light source. I just don't know where it is. So if I see that light bulb, once I selected something, I see where the light source is, which is completely off. So it's not in the right place. Why is it so? If you select any kind of item and you see the light bulb element just in the top left corner, you see that the object has a light source. This is done intentionally. If you download something from the 3D warehouse and if lamp is in its name, then the light source is assigned automatically, but the automatic assignment is sometimes not the best. So you have to fine tune that. You have to go to the edit light sources, and now you see that these 4 lamps have one light source altogether. So that we have to change, and let's see how we do that. So 2 things we have to do. First, we have to make sure that from every view the light source is in the right place. So I'm just going to move it within the lamps themselves. But now that's only 1 lamp out of 4, so by clicking on add, I can add another light source, which should be, I think it's in the global light sources, compact ones, and 11 watts would be fine. Okay, so now I have another one, which I have to, again, position to the right place. So now I have 2 light sources. If I click back and forth, you see how they toggle. And but you know, 2 of the lamps are now having light sources, sort of light bulbs, but there's nothing for the remaining 2. So if I hit OK, I see on the render that 2 lights are on, but the remaining 2 are off. So I'm going to show you a shortcut of how to copy and paste light sources. Let me just highlight the 2D and select the lamp itself, and I'm going to show you how to sort of drag and copy the lamp. So just let's click on the light bulb icon, and then I can select the light source and move a copy like this. So 1 copy is made, and again I'm clicking on the light source I want to select and copy. Move a copy again, and you see in the 3D and on the rendered image that now all 4 lamps are on. So they are marvelously on. So they are lighting up the place the way they should be. Once I'm done with that, I need to save this object as a lamp in my library. Why should I do that? Because then it would appear not only as an object, which again I would need to add additional light sources to. No, this time I'm going to save this lamp as an object with 4 individual light sources for later use, so I can add name to it, category, etc. Again, if I have saved it in my library and later on I want to modify where it is, I just right click and I'm going to say sorting category, and that way I'm just going to be able to reassign where this thing is. So for example, if you want to have like a manufacturer item library, then you can add another category to it, so that way you would have your own user-made customized lamps. I think this wraps up creating a new lamp, but what about using an existing one and defining how it looks like? So let's place a spotlight over there, which I can do from the libraries. Let me just navigate to somewhere where I can actually see what's going on, and maybe turn off the visibility of the other lights. So I'm just going to turn these things off, making sure that they are not on, interfering with my model. And also, if I click on the lamp itself, I can turn this one on, off I mean, by clicking on the light source and disabling it. So this is not going to interfere with my site. Okay. Let's go back to the spotlight itself, and I think there I want to place something. Let's go for the object library and look for a spotlight. Let me just find one which looks the way I want. Yeah, that's the one. It's facing away from the wall, so once I have positioned it, I can just rotate it. Just 1 second, clicking it on the 2D. I can just change the, base elevation is not good either, so I have to raise it up. And then you see that something is happening in the render, but until I turn this the other way, you're not going to see the results. So here we go. Question: how do I show the light in the 3D? Maybe I don't have time for rendering, so how do I visualize the light in the 3D model environment? Well, there's a switch for that, and if you go to the 3D, you can fine-tune and toggle how you want to show your lights, because it is possible to show the light sort of casting in the 3D as well. This is heavy on your CPU, but you can enable that if you want to show how your lamps would look like. So I'm just going to switch this off and investigate how to change the light pattern. So again, if I select the lamp, I'm able to define or customize the cone of light itself. So let me just go to light, and again I'm going to turn this one off, so nothing else should be on except for this line. It's better to do it this way, because otherwise everything else would interfere with your light pattern, but this way you can concentrate on what's really at hand. So clicking on the light, I'm in the lamp itself, and again we go back to the edit light source. It's not only for adding new lights, it's also for editing ones. So here again I see different views of my model. Let's just change it to something else. And here I can change the cone itself. So if I want to say that maybe it's not that wide, maybe it's a narrower cone, then I can change that right over here. So if I change anything, you see that things change in the 2D representations on the left hand side, but also in the 3D you would see the result for that. So this is one way to do it. So if you want to change how wide the light is casting, or the lamp is casting the light, here you can do that. And once I have accepted it, I can fine-tune it a bit further in the 3D. So let's just hit OK and select the lamp while you have the light on, so that way you can see the result, obviously. So if you select the lamp, you would see the movement markers, but if you click on the bulb again, you see again movement markers, but if you click on the blue axis, then you can just change where the light is casting its light. So if you change that back and forth, you see what will be in focus. So that way you can move the lamp itself, you can move the light, so you can direct that. So if you want to put something in emphasis, then that's how you do it. So now I'm just going to switch that off and proceed with the LED strips. I think is the next one. Let me just consult with my chart. LED strips, now what are they good for? Well, essentially they are models which are not lamps. They are just pieces of 3D models which are able to emit light. So let's see that podium over there, and I want to have a circular LED strip which is emitting some kind of light. So I can draw that with the arc tool, just like that. So clicking on the opposite side, I can draw where one side of the LED strip is going to be. I click on the other side as well, again going with arc, and here I have a ring which looks like regular plastic grayish ring, but this has properties that you can fine tune, namely two important things. One is the light it's going to emit. The other one is the color of the material itself. So let's define an orangish light and change the material itself. These are two different switches, so make sure you have the actual one. If you want to have orange light and bluish body material, then you can do that just fine. So okay, I think I have the object ready. Nothing is happening. Well, it's because it's being pushed into the ground, so I need to raise it up, which I can do with the blue marker or just typing in the value, which is 130, I think. Let me just see how that would look like. Enter, and now in if the render updates, you see, well, there is definitely a result. Maybe it's too much. So I have to tone this down a little bit, but that is why the integrated rendering draft is a good tool, because then you can see how things would look like before you mess things up. So I'm just going to change it to forgiving light, something whitish, and the body material, I think I'm going to leave it as it is. But this is how you can create a 3D body which gives out light. Thinking with this sort of logic, you can use the same thing with three-dimensional letters. So let's get introduced for luminous or lighting text. How does that work? Well, it's in the lighting tool itself. So then you can sort of create three-dimensional text which would be giving out light. What you do first, you have to type in the text, which is going to be e-design. That is the name of our little shop of wonders. And once we have hit OK, we can fine-tune how the text should look like. First, we have to position it like that. So you can fine-tune that later on. Don't forget about that. So just do it like that. And now I can change a few factors. Namely, the extrusion of the text, I'm going to use it as it is, but the size I have to crank up a little bit because this should be larger. And again, the two values, just the same case with the LED strip, would be the lights it's emitting, and the other thing is the color of the object itself. So let's start with first the color. I'm enabling light, and I think some kind of pinkish color would be fine. That would be calling attention to the text. Yeah, and that is just the body material. And now I have to set up the light itself. Again, some kind of pinkish. Okay. I have to, I think, crank up the light. Let's just accept this and see how it looks like. Okay. Not bad, not bad. I have to move it somewhere else with the markers in the 3D. That's the easiest and fastest way to do it. And push it downwards. Well, I think this text should be a bit more prominent. Maybe it should be like really a light. So what do I do then? I can go back to the properties and crank up the lumens like that. So let's just give it a larger value. Hit enter. It's better. Let's just crank up a little bit further. Okay, I think this is getting better. So you can experiment with that. You don't want them to be too sort of prominent, because then it would take the focus away from your design. Let's go inside and see another example for a three-dimensional lighting text, or a luminous text if you prefer. Again, use the same tool, type in the text. I think it's going to be inspire or imagine. Yeah. Click on the surface, click on where the text starts, and click the inclination like that. And then story starts from the beginning. Change the extrusion, so this should be a little bit pushed into the surface, I think. Let's make it thinner print. And the text size and the font is good. The light. Okay, now first let's make it blue for material, and for light it should be bluish again, but yeah, I think this is good. And well, I think I'm satisfied with that. I'm not going to dress it up some more because it will be just rinse and repeat. But now you can see the difference between the body's material and the light it is giving out. Using the same three-dimensional text, there's a neat little trip I can show you what we can do, and that is using dots to create like a guiding light. That is something I picked up along the way. This is a very neat tool with which you can just quickly push down a lot of small spotlights. Let me show you what I mean. So select the 3D text and type in a bunch of dots. Or it could be dashes as well, it doesn't matter. So type that in, click on the surface, and click where you want the direction of these lights to go. Okay, here we go. So now change the size. So I want to push this into the ground, so I have to make them thinner a bit. And I think I need to have another color to them. Let's just go to the luminous tab. I have to enable the light. First crank up the luminosity. Okay. This one is fine. And here's the trick. I want to position them, 2 copies of them, onto my floor plan. So I'm just going to select the element, right click, show on floor plan. Go to the 2D and move this bunch of dots like that. And now I'm making a mirror copy of them. So I want to have another copy of them, but I want to mirror it along the axis. So I just have to go to Edit, Duplicate, Mirror, select the door, and sort of make like a mirroring axis, like that. Click, and now another version of the lamps appear. And you see in the render how they appear. So that is a very easy trick, a very cheap trick if you ask me, to how to create like a sort of like a runway style of guiding lamps.
Okay, so that was the webinar about lighting. Now we are going to rendering.
But as I mentioned, you should be able to focus on what's important, what's the most important for the current situation that you are looking for. And when you start rendering, the first thing that you need to set up properly, besides the lighting, is the materials themselves. So to be able to do that, you need to be able to remove things that are not necessary now. All the tiny details are not necessary. We are looking for the large surfaces, for the wall, the ceiling, and the pocket. And this is what I only would like to see. So for that, I will use the layer system of the software. So I will just go back and see what we have on the 2D. So the project itself is not too complex, but this, what I show you now, works for larger projects as well. Because when you have the 2D and you create your layers, I mean, the software automatically generates layers, but when you would like to optimize your workflow, you will create your own layers, and you will put different versions of the layouts and everything else into certain layers. And in case of rendering and in case of visual design, you would like to be able to remove, for example, the furnishing in one step. You would like to remove the decoration in one step, and so on. So for that, I have an idea here. If you open the layer properties manager and you enable the use layers in this project, as you can see, we have, for this customer area, we have 5 different layers. Now, the recommendation that we used to say is that you should at least create 3 different layers for each and every room when you are optimizing for visuals. One is for the furnitures, and I mean, those are the large parts, the cabinets and the furnishing items themselves, like coach, sofa, and so on. And the other one, so that was the furniture. The other one are the decorative items, like those tiny things, and even some of these computers and keyboards, mobile phones, and everything else. Those are supporting actors of this model. We need them, but not at the first stage. And finally, one layer should be at least for the lighting. Now, in this case, the designer created 3 different layers because he wanted to control them separately. But if you have at least 1 layer by room for the lighting of that room, then you are good to go already. And you can, of course, make it even more details, just as you can see in this case. So 3 layers: furniture, decorative items, and lighting. Now, if I would like to remove things and I don't want to see them, I can disable the visibility here, but I would like to show you an even faster way. I like that the tool to use in these situations, and that is the layer walk. If you click on the layer walk, you kind of literally walk between layers. You can just quickly click on the layer and see what happens on that layer. You can filter to another layer, see what happens on that layer. And if you click on one layer and hold the control key on your keyboard and click on the second one, you can just enable the visibility of 2 layers or 3 layers or as many as you want. You can even actually click and drag if you would like to select multiple things, or you can just use the select it first and shift select the last one. That is the same thing, just as in case you are selecting files, for example, in Windows Explorer. So these are all Windows standards controls. So you just click here and hold Control, click on the slab, and then you have only the slabs. The ceilings are also covered here, and the walls themselves. So if you click OK, you can see that narrowed down, filtered, simpler version of your model. And if you would like to see that in the 3D as well, not just on the 2D, you need to rebuild your 3D, and that is with this little 3D hammer, that's just as we call it, to be able to, now we are able to focus on the wall surfaces, the ceiling surfaces, and the flooring itself, so nothing blocks our view. We have a clear visual of all of these surfaces, so we will see how those happen. But first, before I do that, yesterday or the previous session about lighting, we talked about the artificial lighting. We have quite a few of those here, but we did not cover perhaps the sunlight. So and that is also important when you do the rendering. So I am willing to talk about a little bit about that, how that works. Now, if you would like to set up the sunline, the first thing is that if your model is georeferenced and it is well aligned to the north, then you are good to go already. But you need to be able to determine the calendar date and the time when you would like to see the sunlight affecting your model. So you need to go to View, and you can select any of those options. And now I'm focusing on the shadow simulation because that is one of the quickest and fastest ways to do that. So if you click OK, then you can see this shadow simulation, and in the background we can see how the sunlight affects the model. Now we are outside, so we cannot see everything that is inside, but at least where the door is open, we can look into and see what happens. Now this is not a rendering, this is just a simple visual, but it already gives us a good visual on what will happen. So let's set up, for example, this is on the northern part of the globe. So when I set up a date around somewhere in winter, let's go October 7th, and set up a time, for example, during somewhere in 1330. And let's just hit OK, and I actually go inside because I also would like to show you what happens inside. So when I turn this on again, we can see that the sunlight is coming inside the model. And well, this is something that you would like to consider balancing with, because the sunlight is very, very powerful. Even if you have a lot of light sources all around you, those are not having enough power to kind of suppress the the sunlight. And even if they do, the sun, as you will see, the sunlight is having a very, very important effect on your rendering. So you should consider whether you would like to let the sunlight in and bright up the areas, sometimes risking burning out surfaces because it's too powerful, or you can just select another date and time. And it's an important thing here. If you would like to create a night scenery, you need to move the sun below the horizon, either by using this or by using the time slider. So in that case, you will have a night scene. So I think I will just set up a different time somewhere around summer. While we are on this northern part of the globe, it means that we will have a kind of high-pitched version of the sun angle will be quite high. So I'm willing to use that because the sunlight itself is not coming into the model too much. So let's say okay, and then the shading disappeared automatically, but this doesn't mean that the sun is off. It is just a visual representation temporarily, and when you disable this option, it's not shown, but the render already knows what to do with that. Talking about the rendering settings are very, very important. Let me just talk to you about that, and in the meantime I'm looking for whether everything is okay. I think everything is okay with this session today already. So let's go back here and see what happens with the rendering settings? What sort of rendering settings are we talking about? The rendering settings are here in the view and rendering, and you have a few options for rendering, and also you can find that same golden globe here. If you click here, you have all the same options. Now, last time my colleague used the integrated rendering. That is integrated in terms of how it behaves inside the software. It acts and behaves as a drawing, so it will be in a window inside Archline. And today I'm using a standalone rendering. First I will use the real time, so you will see what happens directly. And then I will show you how to turn real-time renderings into final renders. So the first thing about the rendering is the resolution and the render quality. Now, when we do the renders, resolution is key for the speed of rendering. I told you that I will talk about what sort of settings and how do they affect rendering, and resolution affects rendering time a lot. So when you do the renders for yourself and not for your client, you should not go with high resolutions. Now, for example, talking about the widescreen resolutions that you can select here, this is kind of a work, a study resolution. It's for yourself. When you do the rendering, you will see all the reflections, all the lights, even on the small version of the rendering, but it will render way faster than you would render, for example, a widescreen full HD, or even talking about 4K that is even longer. So for yourself, you will always render images in lower resolution to have a much faster render, but for your clients you will go with either this or this, something larger, because they will likely see your images not only on their mobile phones but also on large screen TVs in their home. So to avoid having blurry, not good quality images in terms of resolution, you should render larger resolutions for them. And also you can set up user-defined size. In that case, you can type any sort of resolution. And talking about this, I wanted to show you something about how the ray tracing itself works, because that is how it is connected with the settings that we are using here. So ray tracing, how does that work? Ray tracing this is a very simple concept of ray tracing from Wikipedia. And it actually tells you how the rendering works. Now, the image and the camera are the things that are this represents what we see. The image has a certain resolution. Those are those little squares, as you can see. So as you can see, the larger the resolution, the more squares you have, the more calculations the software has to do, because the software actually calculates each and every pixels, what the color of that pixel is. And using this kind of filter that we have in front of us in a certain resolution, we see the virtual world. And if we actually, while I'm talking about as a renderer, I'm imagining myself as I am the renderer, so I'm seeing the world through these tiny dots, and I'm shooting rays to the world and see what it hits, whether it hits a scene object, it hits the building itself, it hits my desk, which I represented in my interior, or it hits the sunlight itself. So this is how the renderer works. It shoots rays, millions of rays, so that's why it takes longer to calculate a version of a ray traced image than a line drawing, which we had before. So it calculates all these details for each and every pixel. So again, coming back to the resolution, this is why the resolution is important. So you should not have a large resolution when you work for yourself, but when you do the rendering, you need to increase the resolution and do full HD or even larger images for your clients. Okay, rendering quality. Now, real-time draft is selected, and it is because I have selected that option when I started the command here. I will tell you what the difference are between exterior, interior, and high detail, and what use they do have. And now we can talk about the sunlight settings, the visualize the light sources, enable artificial lights, and enable sunlight options. Now, visualizing the light sources, it is a kind of a heritage option from from previous versions of Archline from 2015 or even before. This actually generates tiny kind of bulbs or so to the sources of where you have your lights themselves inside the fixture itself. But for the modern renderer that we have now in the software, it's not necessary. So basically, I recommend you to turn this off. But if you would like to test it, just go and do, and you will see what it has, what it offers. But it is not necessary for a well done lamp already. So you don't need to turn it on. Keep it off. Enable artificial lights. Artificial lights are all the lamps. So obviously, if you would like to see them, you need to turn this option on. If you have all your light sources on and turned on, and you disable this option, it's like a very large switch for all your light sources in your scene that you can use to turn off the artificial lights in one step. And the following thing is the sunlight. It is the same thing for the sunlight. Sunlight is a light source itself. You can disable the sunlight, but keep in mind that if you disable the sunlight, it is not creating a night scene. I will show you that. It is simply disabling the sunlight. Bump mapping, I will talk about that in a later session when we will see the materials, because this is a material setting. You should turn this on because it will give you a very nice and detailed surface. And also the background. Backgrounds are important because you can either have a plain white background, which I have now behind me, or you can actually have a photograph or anything like that, or even you can have panoramas. So if you go with a panoramic 360 background, you can select any of those backgrounds that we offer with the software, or should you have any sort of HDR background, I mean the file format, it is .hdr. In that case, you can select it here. I think I will just simply go with an image, and I will use this background image with the city sky cloudy, and this is what I will use. Now, in case of using background images, you should keep in mind that the resolution of those background images should be at least the same or larger than the scene that you are, I mean the final resolution of your render. If it's smaller, then the background will be blurry, so you should avoid that. And okay, so now I have an image. I can also specify my own photograph, which I took on the side. If you do renders as I do now, which is kind of an easy to understand render for the clients, when your eye level and the target level where you look at, it's just the same level. So as you can see, all the verticals are nice verticals, not any sort of certain slanted angle because of the distortion of the perspective. And you should apply similar backgrounds where you can see the horizon is in the middle or around the middle of your photograph. And of course, you can change the brightness of this background. Should it be too bright or dark, you can change it. Well, in this specific case, looking from here to there, we won't see this background, but should we have a mirror surface here, we will just as well see it, because we have a glass background behind us now, so it will be reflected here. Okay, so, and one another thing here is the rendering frame, which you can turn on and off here. Or you can use this option here, the render frame on and off, and you might notice something appearing here. And it seems that there is nothing of a big change here, but it's simply because my screen, what I see in my workspace, is too narrow for that wide angle. So I need to kind of hide this to be able to show you what happens. So this is the rendering frame. So now the software tells me that whenever I render my renders in this certain resolution or anything similar to this in ratio, this is exactly what I will see. Everything inside this area is what I will see. So this is a kind of good helper when you are looking for a good scene, where you're looking for the best shot, when you would like to see a tiny bit of the table here and I don't know, anything else in the center. So this is what we have set up, and now we will start doing the rendering. So I will just use the same standalone real-time draft. Just in this case, I started it from here, not from here. The settings are the same, and I will go. Yeah, well, I have not set up perhaps this image. Yeah, this should be cloudy. Yeah, and start rendering. Okay, so the rendering now, because I have selected a standalone rendering, it starts as it looks like a standalone application, and it really behaves as well. So in this case, you can I don't know, put it to the other screen if you have multiple screens or something like that. So it's in some sort of situations it's easier to handle. And now this render was done in literally no seconds because it is a very small resolution and it is only a draft render. But we already see whether we have our light sources turned on or not, because we cannot see those cones on the wall surfaces. We can suspect that perhaps I have forgotten turning on this light source here, which is the plain ceiling itself, and I actually have an enable light source option here which is turned off, so that's why I cannot see that. So if I enable this option and I go back to the render, which is here, I can see that. And as you can see, the light balance is already changed a little bit because we have something in the render which most of the renders actually do have. It is called a tone mapper, and you can imagine a real world tone mapper. If you think of your iris, that is a tone mapper. If it actually reacts to the light conditions, and it opens in darker areas and it closes brighter areas, so it controls what sort of amount of light sources you will see. So the image that you see around will most of the time won't burn out, so you will see the world around you. So this is what happens in the render as well. So as you can see, now we have all those nice light cones, and I would like to show you one another thing before I'm talking about these effects here, and that is that now I have turned this on. I actually have sunlight outside, but if I want, I can test whether this rendered image looks better with the current sunlight settings or without those sunlight settings. So in that case, I can go to the details, and as you can see, these are all the same details. You can, even when you already have the render in front of you, you can change those settings. You can disable the sunlight and see what happens then. So it looks like it is nighttime now because the light conditions changed. It is not. It is like a very cloudy day when the sunlight is above the clouds, so it has a very soft light and very dim light effect on the world. So this is what we have now. I could dial down the date and time to create a night scene, but this is what I wanted to show you. So whether you do have night or sunlight or not, it affects the light conditions, and it also affects the graininess of your image. This is also important. If you do not have sunlight turned on, most of the time you will have more grainy images on lower quality settings. I mean, I'm talking about these. I will show you what those mean. So in that case, you can increase the rendering settings, but I will cover that a little bit later. But now we are fine with that. We are not looking for clear images for draft renders. We are looking for reflections, lights, whether they are on, and surfaces themselves. So now that I can see all the surfaces around me, I can perhaps I can also close this render, and I can tell the software, okay, let's change these shadow options and go with a different light setting. In that case, I can just close it and start it again. I just wanted to double check whether I have July, the setting that I'm willing to work with, and then I can just restart it again. The software remembers the settings. You can start rendering again, and there you go. You will have this render very fast. Now, what I see here is a kind of mud surface, and it is because I did not talk about the render styles yet. And render styles are key factor in the software because those affect how your materials look like. And those are actually here in the left hand side, the design center. And by the way, sometimes if you accidentally close the design center or anything like that, it is a common mistake for beginners and even for other ones. When I sometimes I do that by accident. You can just go and enable everything as it was before using the user interface, reset interface to factory default, and then you will have everything as it was before. So should you not find that what I'm looking for now, you just use this option and you will see. And then now I'm using the catalog. Now in the catalogs you have material catalogs, object catalogs, and you have actually render styles. Render styles are ceiling, chrome, curtain, wall, and everything like that. Those are kind of material presets. And let me show you what that makes. I mean, I have a ceiling here, and when I click and drag this option here and I release and I click on this surface, it actually did something, but I don't see the result here because this is for the rendering. It changed how the ceiling behaves. It changed how the ceiling looks like. Now, before I show you what the rendering result is, I will change the wall and I will change the pocket as well. So I'm looking for something that is called wall. Okay, so these are obviously wall surfaces. I need to use the wall option here. And as you can see, it looks like this wall is kind of a material because it has a brick texture, but it will not change how it looks like. So I just click and drag, and it won't change the texture. When I click here, it kind of changed the brightness of this this surface. And if I click here as well, you can see that something has changed, but not the texture. And it actually changes the reflectivity and all sorts of other real-world physical values of your model. So let's see what the result is after I use the pocket, because that will be the most visible part of our model now. So I just click and drag and release and click here. And as you can see, it will be reflective. And let's see what that does with our model. So now we can see that, well, I think I need to dial down the exposure. I will talk about the effects, but I think the exposure is just too much now. So something like that. And as you can see, now the whole light scene is also changed, because now when the light hits the surface, it is much more bright, especially the ceiling. The ceiling is that sort of ceiling rendering style that I used is tailored for that. It is making the ceiling brighter than normal, which is what your clients will expect for the renders. They don't want to see the gray ceiling that it really is in reality. If you see it on a photograph, they would like to see something brighter, so you can just apply it. And the same goes for the walls. And when I apply the pocket setting to the pocket texture, or the pocket material, whatever I had before, it is kind of reflective. We can barely see. You can handle this content as a drawing. You can move it holding down the scroll wheel and moving the mouse, and you can zoom in and out. So this is how you can handle it. And if I zoom in a little bit, we can kind of barely see a dim reflectivity of that material. So as you can see, pockets are set to be reflective a little bit. And this already gives us a lot of detail. When we will have those furniture sitting on this ceiling, those will have that nice contact reflectivity and contact shadow, which makes them really being there. And if you would use a matte surface, which renders way faster, but it will be flat. So I would tell you that when you are focusing on the most important materials, I mean the dominant materials of your model, those are usually the ceiling, the wall surfaces, and the flooring, and obviously the glass surfaces of the openings of your model. Then you should make them reflective. It will slow down the render, of course, more than using a matte surface, but it will be much more realistic. Okay, so let's see how I can customize it. If I don't like how reflective it is, I would like to make it a little bit more high polished or change the settings. How can I do that? In case of controlling the materials, in customizing the material, which I already have in front of me, I can just right click on any of the surfaces and click on Find Material. Now the Find Material option finds the material, exposes its texture, its size, its rendering style. I can change the rendering style even from here, and I can just scroll down and see its brightness, its reflectivity, its blurriness, and so on. So let's see what happens if I dial up the reflection to something high as, I don't know, for example 70%, and let's just go back and check what happened. Now it's more reflective, but it has no clear reflection, and the clear reflection, it is kind of depending on the porosity of your material, how grainy your material is. If it's high polished, it has less blurriness for the reflection. So if I would like to create a high polished version of this floor, I just dial down this blurriness to 0, and then I go back here, and now it's much more reflective. This is even not still a perfect mirror, because I actually have bomb mapping applied here, as you can see it on the left hand side. Bomb mapping is making those kind of tiny, bumps of the surface. That comes from the texture. In this case, the software is able to calculate the bumpiness of your surface based on the texture. It looks at the bright and dark pixels, and it handles them as higher and lower areas. This is an automatic system, which is very, very convenient. But if you don't want to use the automatic surface definition, you can just go here and select any sort of other material type. Even you can browse for your own normal map, which someone else designed for you, or you can do that. Then you can just apply that. I won't go this deep now because this is a starter session for the rendering, but you can even control that. Now I changed the reflectivity of the surface, and I changed the blurriness. But if I would like to have a much more realistic pocket, not very high polished version, in that case I just dial this up somewhere around perhaps 20, and I will test the render, and I see the result is okay. I think this is much better. It has its own glossiness, kind of blurred glossiness, but I like that. I will keep this, and later I can still tweak it. But the most important thing is that you should tweak these materials without the other things occluding your view. You should clear the view just as I did before, removing unnecessary parts, setting up the ceiling, setting up the wall surfaces and the pocket, and then put the other things inside. So this is what I will do now. I think now I'm done with this. I could further tweak all the rest of the materials, but this is the same step that I would do for each and every, so I won't repeat myself. One thing I would like to show you, because now what I did not change the material. I simply I did not switch materials. I changed the material which I already had on the surface. But what if I would like to switch this material to another one? For example, this. I would like to test whether it looks much better with I don't know, a glass surface or a mirror that I already have in my libraries. So in that case, what I will do, I just go to the home screen, and I go to the materials library, and I go and find something perhaps in the glass and mirror, and I just look for any sort of mirrors here. Like, let's see this. I would like to use this turquoise mirror, and I just apply it on the surface. And this is also a click and drag command, but it is a little bit different than the render styles, because then you have a few options what you would like to do with this material. And now I would like to change it on this surface only. So I select this last option. I click here, and then now this is reflective also. So what I see here, I can see the background, as I mentioned before, because we have a clear glass surface behind us, so we can see through that. And so in that case, even though you don't see directly the background, it could be important as a supporting actor for your model, because it gives a lot of detail into the model. So I actually don't want to make this as a reflective surface, so I just remove this setting. I just disable this and go back to the previous setting. And then I would like to bring in more and more details. So how to do that? You need to go back to the 2D, and you don't even have to switch drawings. It's just important to make it active, and then you can go into the layer settings. And why it's important to switch back to 2D? Because if you are still in the 3D, if you click here, you will see only 3 layers, because you actually now in the model you only have 3 layers, because you didn't build the content of the rest of the layers. So if you go back to the 2D, you will always see all your layers, and based on those layers you can build what you would like to see in the 3D, and only those layers will be available in the 3D. So that's important. So now I'm going back to the 2D, and I'm enabling the furniture. For example, this is what I do. I just hit Control. I'm holding Control, and I click in here and say okay, and just rebuild the 3D. So this is what we have here. Okay, so now let's see what the content is now here. Now, as you can see, this render, what I'm using, this is real-time draft, is continuously trying to keep track of what I change during even rebuilding the model, moving things around, changing their materials. Should it not happen anymore, because sometimes this render just simply loses connection with the software, because it is a very, very CPU intensive process, and if your computer is not powerful enough, it will just say, okay, I'm terminating this because I don't want to kill the computer. So if that happens, no worries. You only need to close this, say yes, okay, and then restart it again and say, okay, standalone rendering again, and start again. You will go back where you left off. So now I'm having this view, and yeah, I need to dial this down, but I did that before already, so I will talk about this a little bit later. So now I would like to change the materials, for example, the secondary dominant surfaces now for me are these surfaces here. Well, those are looking cool, so I won't change the paintings, but I would like to change these white furniture surfaces, and I would like to test how they look like. And so I go back to the home screen and I say, okay, render styles, and let's go with metal first. So I think a metal will look cool with this. So this is a metal surface. Apply it here. And I applied it on the material, not on a surface. So wherever else I use that material, it is automatically visualized. So I'm coming back here. Well, maybe it's a bit too much, or I can tweak it, or I can just go with, for example, a marble or anything else, and let's see how that looks like. And if I like this much better, well, I think it has a nice glossy surface, especially when I dial this down, and we can see how it looks like. So I will go with this one. So this is what you will end up with, changing the materials, and still you have the option to fine tune whatever else you would like to fine tune with that material. Okay, so let's bring in a little bit more details. So the second step is bringing in details, test them, whether they look like you wanted, and then when they are, then just bring in more details, more details, more details. You will see that rendering will gradually slowing down because you will have more surfaces, and this is where the fifth key point, the fifth key factor, the complexity of the model comes in. Whenever you turn in more and more details into the model, it will slow down the rendering process because this virtual eye, the camera, the render itself will see more surfaces. So so when I'm bringing in more details, it happens the same way. I'm going back to the 2D, and I'm again using the layer walk. I like to use this, so I'm just turning on the decorative items, and yeah, I think this is enough for now. I'm saying okay, and let's just rebuild the 3D and see what happens then. I will see all those computers, keyboards, and everything else in this showroom already appearing. And finally, at the end, I will turn on the lights as well. But this is actually what I will end up with. And what I would like to do is that, yeah, well, this is what I mentioned, that now, unfortunately, the renderer lost the connection. No worries. You can you can try re-render it. Sometimes this helps. But if it's not making the thing that you want to, then you just close it and go back to the 3D and just do this standalone rendering now real time, and we will talk about the rest later. So I just started again, and you will see this is kind of a work render, so it's not a large resolution. It's only 800 by some, and so it takes not too long to render, but it takes a little longer now because I have a little bit more details in the render. So now I think now it's good to talk about the effects that you can set up even during rendering. So if your rendering takes longer, and large renders will take much longer than this one, then you still have time to set up the brightness, the contrast, the saturation, and everything else for your render. Now, I recommend you to always start with the exposure. If your exposure is not correct, you won't do anything nice with the brightness, contrast, and everything else. If it's not correct, just as in case of photograph, if you have an overexposed photo, it is really difficult to create a cool, nice image out of that. So first, set up the exposure. In case of interior scenes, most of the time you need to increase the exposure, but sometimes when your scene has enough light sources already and it is very, very bright, perhaps you need to dial it down. I'm highlighting this because now we are rendering interiors, and when we talk about exteriors, that's another topic. I will talk about this at the end. You will need to handle this a little bit different. So exposure is correct. Now, setting up the exposure is finding white. If you feel whites are correct, then exposure is okay. You should try to avoid burnout surfaces as much as possible. If you still do have too much, perhaps you should consider changing the light scene. Perhaps some of your lights are too bright, but something like this is, I think, correct. We did not lose the detail still of this detail, but we only have a very, very few parts burn out, and actually I need those here because this represents how bright those areas are. So I'm fine with this. Then I can focus on brightness, contrast, and the rest. Brightness is something that The difference between brightness and exposure, we can consider that exposure is like opening the iris, opening the aperture of your photo machine, and it controls how much light your eye and your, in this case, the renderer gets. So it sets up the overall light amount. Now brightness, on the other hand, it is doing something which you could do in, for example, Photoshop or something else, just it's integrated here. It is actually making all the pixels brighter or all the pixels darker. Now the reason why you should not use it too much, because as you can see, it has a negative effect. When you use it with a too high value, it is actually washing out the colors, and you don't want that. So you should always perhaps fine-tune brightness and contrast and the rest of these, but not too much. So you just handle it the way you want, and as you see that, well, now this is a little bit better, then you should also control the contrast, because once you change the brightness, you should kind of compensate this negative effect with the contrast as well, to make this kind of washed out flat effect of brightness with the contrast a little bit. It's, again, if you use too much of that, you won't end up with anything good. Now the reason why you still can control it in much higher areas, because this is one sort of light condition, and you can do many different type of renders, night scenes, and as well. So in that case, the contrast and the brightness is something that you will change a little bit more different. Saturation changes how saturated your image is, and if you change brightness, you can kind of compensate that color washing by adding a little bit more saturation, and actually your clients will expect more vividity in your renders as well, so you need to add a little bit more of the saturation usually than what is kind of expected normal. But again, if you just dial this up, it will be kind of more cartoon-like. If you would like to go for that effect, you can of course do that. But again, I think the golden rule here is to do it, but not too much. Don't overdo it. And shadows, midtones, and highlights, those are actually, well, shadows are dark tones more like, because if I dial this up, as you can see, all dark areas are even darker. So it's not necessarily only the shadows, it is for the dark areas. So you can actually make dark areas more strong, more effective on the render. It's kind of a selective contrast. You can also do something similar with the midtones and something with the highlights. Now highlights are these areas that we already have experienced as very, very bright areas. So in this case, perhaps I don't need to change that, but again, you can change that. The white balance is for kind of a mood effect as well, because if you use a white balance which is kind of cool white balance, cold colors, then you can set up a feeling for the same render. I didn't change the sunlight outside, but I can set up a scene looking like it is, for example, somewhere in Sweden in wintertime, or I can just dial this up and bring in more orange, and in that case it looks like somewhere in the Bahamas or somewhere else. So you can just change the mood of the image. If you don't like the result and you would like to go back to the default, pro tip, you just click here and the software resets this value, and any of those works the same. So if you would like to reset brightness, you just click here. Now if you would like to reset everything, you click here, the reset all option, but if you would like to only reset any of those options, you just click on the icon. Okay, and so I already covered exposure, so this is how it works in practice. So resetting all back to default, changing the brightness, this is how it works. Well, I forgot to show you one render style which I wanted, and that is the surfaces of these screens. Now those are special materials, not because of their texture, but because how they behave, and you will find a material called real emissive. Now we have a false emissive, that's for similar result, but for less powerful computers. Real emissive will actually behave as a light source. So if you just click and drag it over this screen, perhaps this other one, you will see a different result where you could tell that yeah, those are monitors, those are having a nice bright effect. And if I would turn off all the light sources, those will really light up the scene, because those are actually now special light sources. Those are not created as light sources, those are created as materials, but those materials behave as light sources. So those are the real emissive materials for screens, advert surfaces, and so on. Okay, so I think I have covered pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about this time, and I wanted to show you how to switch to a final render, how to create, now we are working with low resolution renders, and we are talking about real-time rendering. But if I would like to change this, I can just select a different resolution. For the sake of speed, I won't do that now, but this is where you change it to the final version. And then you can also say that, okay, let's just go with an interior quick render. How does that look like? And in that case, the software will actually do a little bit more analysis. As you can see, you won't see the image right away. It takes a little longer, but all those grainy surfaces we had before, all those blotches that we have, those dark patches on the surfaces, they do disappear, because now the software considers more details. It is making a more precise calculation, to say the least. And as you can see, it takes even longer, even though we are only using a very small resolution for work resolution. And still, if I'm not satisfied with the brightness and the contrast and everything else, I can, even during render, I can change those. I can change the brightness. I think I will make it a little bit brighter with the exposure, and then I can change the brightness, contrast, and everything else. And when the result is done, I can just click on save, and I can save it in a PNG, JPEG, or anything else. The software offers PNG by default because it has a very good quality by default, and it's having a relatively good size. But if you would like to go with a JPEG, you can just save it as a JPEG. If you would like to go with a kind of good to go option, I would recommend you to save in PNG, and later with any sort of, even with Paint, you can save a JPEG if you have forgotten. But if you would like to save the best quality, which is identical to what you saw on screen without any sort of JPEG loss, you should save the PNG, and then later you can decide what else you would like to do with that. Okay, so this is how it looks like. Now it will perhaps take like 2 minutes or so, and the work renders, the real-time drafts only took perhaps 10 or 15 seconds. So this is how large of a difference you will experience between rendering times when you simply increase the rendering quality from the lowest, from real-time rendering, to the middle, which is interior. So let's see, now we have this result. Let's just keep that in mind, that it was clear and it was nice, and we have all the details what we wanted to see. And let's check what would we achieve with an exterior quick render. Will it work for an interior? And let's just start it again. Now, the software did not restart it again. And in this case, it is kind of logical, because just imagine that you render for, I don't know, 10 minutes, half an hour, or an hour, and simply by changing something, it restarts render and you lose something because you have simply forgotten saving it. No worries, it won't restart itself automatically if you change between the final renders. You need to restart it manually. So now I will render this visual using an exterior rendering setting, and let's see what the result will be. And actually, and this is what I wanted to highlight, exterior render, even though the name implies that it is for exteriors and it is really tailored for exterior renders, it is actually more accurate if we say it is tailored for well-lit scenes. And now our scene is very well lit. We have quite a lot of surfaces, light sources around us, so it will give you the same, nearly identical, same clear image just as the interior render would have created for you, but it will be faster. So it would be a bad habit to tell you that you should always go with the highest render setting and you will get the best result, because many cases when your scene is very well lit, you will have the same result or very, very identical, just with the lowest production setting, which is the exterior quick render, and this will be perfect just as well. So you won't have to wait as long as I have waited before. It was nearly 1 minute, and before it was around 2 minutes, so it's kind of half the time.
Okay, so we have made it till the end. It was a lot of information about the rendering. I will share now, just the last time, the screen. By the way, I will give you also today homework for lights. I will send you on your email if somebody wants to do it. And actually you will get the project that you saw in the webinar, and you will open it and insert the lights. So play with the lights a little bit, whichever you want. You can also type these text lights, and then try do the rendering, the settings and everything, so you will see how it goes. Once again, if you have just the promo version of Archline, the rendering probably will not work. So you will have to type in the activation code that our staff have sent you. That's how you get the full version of Archline for 2 months. So if the rendering will not work with you, that means that you have the promo version still. So you can try do your homework. I will just say again for the exam we have, you will get today, for those of you who hasn't heard, I will send the exam also on your email. It is a short questionnaire, very easy. It is 8 questions. You will know it, it's very easy. And with a short pool, it is very, I hope you will say something. It is important that we have the feedback of the workshop. So solve the exam till Sunday. You have 3 days, and send it back to me on my email. And that's the way you will get a certificate of the workshop. Okay, I think that's it. That was our 4-day workshop. I will also send you on the email all the material, all the videos. If anyone is interested in price, I will also send you the links to check it. And what else? If you are a student, you can have your own free student license. So if you send to me your student certificate, you will get your free license. And that's it. I hope you like it. Send me your feedback. We'll be happy to hear. And also you can write me anytime also when this workshop is over. Okay, even if I will not know any issues if you will have, I will ask Zoltan, who will help me out, and we will get to the bottom of the issue. So if any of you have questions now, you can ask me, or we will hear each other through email. And I will say thank you for being here, and I hope you have a nice time, that you learn. And okay, thank you very much, and have a nice day. Bye bye.